Hey, so in this video I'd like to talk about how I've been finally able to achieve a dream of mine that I've had for almost 15 years, and to encourage you, if you have a similar dream, to just give it a try yourself. As you were able to tell from the thumbnail and the video description, I'm not talking about curing cancer, unfortunately. I'm talking about building a fully functioning web app with the help of vibe coding. So in this video, I'd like to give you a little background about myself, how technical I am, what qualifies me to develop software, so that you can compare that against your own skills and your own knowledge. I also want to give you an overview of the tools that I've tried and to explain what actually ended up working for me and why that ended up working for me. So the rules of YouTube say that I have to drag this out for as long as possible, but I hate this. So I ended up with Replit. That worked the best for me, but you have to find out what works best for you. And I explain at the end why I think that Replit is the right choice for me. Also, I've added chapters to this video, so if you want to skip over the boring parts, you can just jump to whatever interests you the most. If you also prefer this kind of video over something that is drawn out for as long as possible, I'd appreciate a like. Thank you. And why did it take me 15 years to build a fully functioning web app? Well, a fully functioning web app, in my view, has a couple of parts. It has a public website that tells customers about the service that I'm providing. It has a function where they can register as a new user, ideally also pay for the service that they're about to use. And after they log in, they have the app part of the website where they can actually use something that provides them more value than they paid me for in order to use that. And in order for that app to function, it usually takes the whole app part, so basically the back end, almost always accompanied by a database, to store whatever they did in the app, create an image, a text, save something they uploaded, and so on and so forth. And since you don't want to provide everything for free, you need a payment gateway to handle the customer's payments. And I tried to learn everything that is necessary to build something like that for, as I said, 15 years. So I started out with learning C#, yes, I'm that old, then HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which theoretically would have let me build at least the website and the front end of an app, but I would still have to build the back end, which would mean setting up a server, setting up a database, connecting all of this, running the background script. So I tried to move on to Ruby on Rails, Python, PHP, but I always got to a point where I really struggled. Ruby on Rails, for example, even installing that on a Mac was something that I ran into issues multiple times. And that was always frustrating for me because I've always been an ideas guy. Wouldn't it be great if you had an app that could do this? Wouldn't it be great if there was a website that would do this and that? But in order to bring that to life, I would always have to find somebody technical, right? Who would actually have the technical know-how to set up a server, to set up a database, to set up all the background scripts necessary and connect all that stuff. Until ChatGPT and Claude came along, and suddenly there was somebody who would help me fix my coding problems. But I still wasn't able to build a full web app, and here's the reason why. So this is obviously just my view of things, but I think there's like 4 different ways to build web apps in the middle of 2025. And the first way to build it is with something that I call the MVP builders, right? So you have tools like Lovable, Bolt.new, or DataButton, where you can enter a prompt and say, create me a dashboard for this, or create me a website that has a little game on it. They increasingly get more powerful, but so far there is a limit on how complex an app can be that runs on these tools. And another downside of these MVP builders, if you want, was that you essentially had to manipulate everything just through prompts. If you wanted to do a tiny change the corner radius of a button, for example, you would have to be really specific in your prompt and hope that it didn't change anything else around the button or the functionality of it. That's where tools like the drag and droppers came in. So what Bubble or Webflow or Adalo did is the Photoshop approach, so to say. They say, coding is so complex, we don't want to show the user any code. What we will do is we will give drag and drops and sliders and buttons and every UI elements for every single thing that you could change in a website. You can move elements of a website around. You can also design a back-end flow, but that's where the Photoshop comparison comes in. You have to learn the UI of the builder that you're using. And that's, again, where I tapped out. Because if you've ever worked with Bubble or Webflow, these are great tools, but you have to, of course, learn the tool then again, yeah. And I found that they were great in designing the UI and the front end, but they had a really strange way of designing the back ends and also debugging that. So if you're a real coder, you will, of course, use one of the coding assistants. So Cursor, GitHub Pilot, and so on. Tools that live in the IDE, in the programming environment where you actually write the code, and you still write the code line by line, but you have an assistant that looks at the code and can give you hints and even write new code for you. But you're still responsible to deploy the code, to host the code, to set up the environment where the app runs, and all these things. The coding assistants help you design all this environment, but you have to do everything yourself. And for deploying and running your app, you still have to deal with the back-end infrastructure tools like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and so on, which you have to learn how to set up, which you have to learn how to use, which you have to learn how to make set up securely. And the tool I landed on and that I was actually able to use and create functioning web apps with that are out there and deployed already is called Replit. And if you want to give Replit a try, I would really appreciate it if you could use my link to sign up. That's in the first comment and the video description. And I know it's easier to just Google Replit or even type it in than to search for that link and click it. But if you click the link, I get a little email that somebody signed up through my link, and that tells my monkey brain, doing video, good, and I will do more videos. So thank you if you click that link. That has no downside for you and just gives me a little boost. Thank you. And I will tell you in a second why I've landed on Replit. But if you want to give vibe coding a try, it's really important that you give some of these tools a try at least, because I don't know what your background is, where you're coming from, and what you might feel more familiar with, or what vibes better with you. So most of these tools are free to use. So just sign up for a few of them and just start developing an idea that you might have and see how far you can go. And maybe just a little bit more about my background. So as I said, I tried to learn programming languages a bunch of times. The last time about 8 years ago, when me and 2 other guys were doing a big data startup. Back then I was the sales and marketing guy, and the 2 other guys, one was doing the front end, one was doing the back end. And during that time, I got a pretty good idea of what it takes to actually create a web app and how complicated it is to change things, the interdependencies, and also, running an app that scales to a certain number of users. After that, I worked in 2 other companies that built enterprise software with a lot of interdependencies, so a lot of APIs into different tools that had to work together in order to achieve something. One was developing e-commerce software, the other was developing software for tour operators. And there I learned a lot about the user journeys, product management, handling feature requests, and all these sorts of things. And without being able to develop software myself or change anything myself, I've always had a strong interest in, how good software, good UI should work, how design thinking works, how, information should be presented to a user in the most relevant and useful way. So now it's actually up to me to actually build something that is useful and pretty and usable the way I've always wanted to. And something else that has helped me build web apps, especially the back end, are these things. No-code automations in tools like Make.com or Zapier or IFT that connect different APIs, essentially replacing a backend server that runs certain scripts at regular intervals. Also, that interacts with databases. All right, and now let me show you why I like Replit so much. Again, it's sort of the best of all of these tools combined into one. So as many other tools, Replit is now leaning heavily into this give me an idea and I will code an app for you. But where they are actually coming from is basically platform as a service. So where Replit has their roots is actually in app deployments. People would write their code and then hand it over to Replit once they actually wanted to deploy it. And Replit would be basically a platform as a service that would set up a server environment, databases, security, and all these things, and just let you run the code that you had built. And that's why their Replit AI agent is a little more than just the standard Claude 3.7 or Claude 4 that everybody else uses, because Replit themselves have hosted the code bases of tens of thousands of apps over the years, which they can use to increase the code base and also the way their agent thinks and helps you solve coding problems. And also, I think it's quite affordable. You can use it for free to try it out, and then costs $20 a month, which isn't that much if you compare it to other builders. Especially the drag and drop builders can get really expensive really quickly if you use them to deploy your apps. And again, a little ask, if you want to give Replit a try, please consider signing up through the link in the description or the first comment of this video. Thank you. So this is what the inside of Replit looks like. You have your AI coding agent on the left here that you can chat with and interact with. And on the right here, I have a preview of the app that I'm building. Don't mind the look and feel. Everything about this can be changed. This is just a standard example, and I really want to show you what Replit can do more than the app that I've built. That's for another video. So again, you have the Replit agent that you can interact with by prompting and tell it to add a new feature, change something about the UI, add a new feature in the backend. And the way I understand it is the Replit agent is a mix of what Replit was able to learn from its own code base mixed with the LLM of your choosing. I think you can switch out if it should use Claude or OpenAI or something, and it will be using the latest version of Claude or whatever, like the other tools. And they have recently improved it, and you can actually feel it getting smarter and getting better at understanding what you put in, what you're trying to achieve, and the solution it comes up with. And like the other tools, Replit is improving constantly. For example, they've just added this little thing down here where you can actually target a certain element. And if you wanted to tell it, make changes to this button, you even have some UI elements like you would get in a drag and drop builder, or also in, I think, Lovable now, that lets you fine tune a specific element without risking, side effects in the other parts of the app. Now, currently I'm working with the coding agent to the left and the preview pane to the right. Replit gives you a huge choice of things that you want to look at. For example, you could look at the console, you could look at the deployments that you've done. Something that I find really helpful is you can look into the database and its entries just by clicking, and you don't have to ask it. You can look at the extensions, you can look at the Git history if that's something you want to find out. You have all sorts of different choices of storage options. So the standard database handles up to 10 gigabytes of things, but you can choose to connect different databases. You can choose to connect AWS stores if you want to really go big. So it is really, really interoperable and lets you integrate a lot of things where other tools would be a lot more clunky in actually implementing that. For example, the last time I gave Data Button a try, it didn't even have the ability to store an upload of a user natively. You would have to connect Supabase or something else for that, or an AWS bucket, and then have to figure out how to connect the AWS bucket with your app and the agent, making that work. If you ran into a problem, you were screwed. So basic functionality, in my view, is here in Replit out of the box, and you don't have to worry about that. The same is true for a payment gateway. Replit has connected Stripe out of the gate, and if you tell your agent to integrate Stripe payments to your app, that's just a line of code, and it's really efficient and quick to do this actually, because it has done this many, many times before, and it's not something that it will struggle with. And if you want to really dive into things, you could actually ask the agent to show you different code snippets, or you will click on that little thing on the left here, and you can click on them, you will see the actual code. And if you really want to get specific, you can highlight parts of the code, ask it to explain that with the assistant, or even modify just a tiny bit of it if you think that this is something that causes a problem or that you want to change. And finally, deployment. So as I said, this is actually where Replit comes from. There used to be like a platform as a service provider. So having a robust backend or a robust platform to host your app on, I think is really, really helpful. So they have a lot of experience in running apps that scale to lots of users and have lots of interactions. Since in the end you will pay for the usage of the app, there will come a certain threshold where it probably gets more expensive to run stuff on Replit than host your own thing. But you have to be really, really successful, and your app has to really take off until you cross that line. And if that happens, you probably have a lot of other problems at that point than where you're going to host it. If you want to go and host it somewhere else, you can export all of the files also. So you're not locked into the environment. You can just take out all your code base and move that somewhere else. So that's also a possibility. But again, this is not something that I would worry about at the moment. I would really like to encourage you to give these vibe coding tools a try. But again, before you worry about this, I would recommend trying out a few vibe coding tools. If you have an idea, see if there's a tool around that helps you vibe with, that you feel comfortable with, and that helps you to turn your idea into a reality. Lastly, again, if you want to give Replit a try, kindly use my link to sign up. It's in the video description and the first comment. And if you have any questions, or if you have any experience with other vibe coding tools, please let me know. I'd love to hear which tool is your favorite or what your experiences with Replit are. Thank you.